gay community is oversexualized.
Everyone has sex, I get that, but why is it that our community is so hyper-focused on that?
I haven't attended many Pride events because of that reason. I was able to go to Portugal and there was this queer retreat, and it was like the first time I felt like safe and secure as a queer person because it wasn't sexual, and I could have these relationships with queer men, but there is no expectation to be sexual.
I resonate with this so hard because as a person who is gay and as someone who doesn't particularly find myself on the more attractive end, being gay is so focused on being attractive, and I feel like there's a bit almost like a social hierarchy system that we gays have put in place for ourselves, where the more attractive you are, the more sex you have, the more social points you have, the more street cred you have, and the more desirable you are based on how attractive and how desirable other gays perceive you as. And that pressure to constantly be sexual is something that I feel like I felt growing up, especially when the gay community is really small and people talk around a lot. I feel like conversations about sex and who's hooking up with who are very prevalent, and yeah, I totally understand what this guy is saying.
We see it at the bars. I mean, it's a go.
You go to a gay club, you're getting grabbed.
You are.
You're getting hugged. You're getting
grown
taps.
I avoid them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just think about it. The only places where you can actually go to find other gays are Grindr and gay bars. There's not that many places where a gay person can just go and be themselves. Well, there's no places where gays can go meet other gays without it being a sexual thing. I mean, gay bars and Grindr. Those are the places where you can go.
I think it's easy to generalize our community as over-sexualized because we're in it, so we're focused on it. But if you look at the straight community, I think they're doing a lot of what we're doing, especially now with more sexual liberation becoming a thing for them and their community. I also think that we have to remember, like, we've only been legal, as in, like, decriminalized in our sex for 20 years this year. That's crazy.
I think he does have a point here. I think because we do live in the community, we do live in the gay community, we're on Grindr, we talk to gay men, we see it so much more than other people see it. So he makes a fair point that we can be pretty hyper-focused on it.
Pride is still necessary.
Yeah, I think Pride's necessary, but we need a PR revamp. Yeah, I think we need a rebrand. I take a lot of issues with what I see at Pride parades now, just because, you know, as we discussed previously, I think that it's a little bit over-sexualized. We're celebrating essentially sex rather than love, and we have people running around riding bikes with their balls out in front of kids. And for me,
I think he hit the nail on the head when he says Pride now is more focused on the sex aspect as opposed to love. I mean, yeah, I felt that way for a long time after attending a few gay events, you know, going to gay bars, drag shows, and going to Pride parades. Everything is so sexual, the jokes are sexual. I feel like Pride has definitely become more about sex than about normalizing, you know, gayness in the world. I always thought that's what Pride was supposed to be about, but now it just feels very sexual. So I'm glad that he said that.
It's the fact that it is allowed because we have this shield of it's Pride, don't mess with gay people, because of our history, which is granted. But people are afraid to look at our culture and say, that's not acceptable. Because if straight people were walking around doing that, it would be a totally different discussion.
Me personally, I actually think Pride is very necessary. I love it. I wouldn't say Pride parades. I feel like you guys are leaning towards like the parades itself. Pride is like liberation, you know. At 2011, you know, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy was abolished. I'm in the military, and had that not been abolished, I would not be able to be, you know, a minority, be openly gay, and still be able to serve my country.
And that's a prime example of the Pride that I would love to attend, is someone who highlights service members, gay CEOs, people who are successful, who are contributing to society.
Yes, 100% I agree with this.
Celebrate who you are, love who you are, but the Pride is no longer about being overly promiscuous because we're not allowed to. We don't need to overcorrect to the point that we start to get backlash.
I live in a very, very red community. Okay, Mike Garcia is my representative. I dress like this to galas, big government galas, realtor galas. No one has said anything to me, and in fact, all I get is positive affirmation that, hey, you're living your best life.
All right, so I see what he's trying to say here, but at the same time, I feel like I'm very glad that he's been able to have this experience, and I won't, you know, downplay his experience as a gay person and being able to dress this way and go into these different areas and feel safe. But I feel like there's a lot of people, like, one person's experience can't be put on the whole, you know what I mean?
I'm so happy for you that this is true for you. I really am.
Yeah, totally.
But the reality is that you represent a small minority of LGBTQ people and how they actually experience life in America.
To your, like, sense of freedom, which is so admirable, I think that
those things are built on blocks of people who probably did feel that pride was necessary. So it's a beautiful thing that we can have the freedom to,
Change our mind.
admire that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I think we all want everyone to feel the way that you feel, like you don't need it, but that's just not the case.
I agree. That was what I was trying to say. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, it's so amazing that he's able to have this lived experience and be able to walk around and feel safe and feel liberated and feel normal, basically, just going about doing his day, dressing how he wants. But I don't feel like we're at that stage yet where everyone can feel that way, which is why I feel like pride is necessary, though it does need a rebrand.
Saying they should be separated is not saying that one is, less important.
The reason why I stepped forward with hesitation was because I think that there are such lived differences and experiences that we experience. Although collectively, I think that we all know the collective experience of being a sexual deviant. There just is a difference in lived experience that I think is important to talk about and acknowledge, and that's my grounds for agreeing with perhaps a separation.
I've actually never really thought about this before, but now when he puts it that way, I do have to say I agree. As a gay person, I will never know what it's like to live as a trans person. It's just a completely different lived experience, even though we both kind of share the same umbrella stereotype of being a sexual deviant. That's a very good point. I never considered, and the thought never even crossed my mind that the TQIA plus should be separated from the LGB. But now that I really think about it, I feel like it kind of should, or at least there should be a bit more of a focus on it. I don't know how to say it, but I think you know what I mean.
And it's not that we can't support the TQ plus.
Right.
I just think that they're two vastly different things.
I think that you oversimplify identity versus sexuality, though, because there are tons of men who identify as straight who have, on occasion, with regularity, once in their life, sex with men, which is why
I think once with men, sure, but I think if there is a guy that's identifying as straight that sometimes dabbles with men,
He might identify as straight, but he's not.
I see what Amir is saying here, but at the same time, personally, I agree, but I don't think it's up to you to say what another person identifies as. If the person identifies as straight but regularly dabbles with men and he says he is straight, I don't think it's right for you, me, and you to call that guy bi, even though he, in our eyes, in our perspective, since he dabbles with men, he must be bi. I would think he was bi, but if he says he is straight, I think that's something that you should respect. And, if he's straight, he's straight. Maybe he just enjoys physically the pleasure of it, but doesn't actually find the man attractive. You know what I mean? The lived experience is just different, and I don't think it's ever a good idea to put our own lived experience and our own frame of mind into the mind of another person. And we should just respect what another person says.
Today, sensationalized content about, targeting children. A lot of it is valid and some of it is not. But a lot of times it's gay men that are doing it, and trans people are getting blamed for it when it's really gay men in drag.
Right.
And because the letters are together, people don't know the difference. And even when I first started coming out, the first thing that somebody said to me was, "Are you going to transition into a woman?" And I'm like, "Wait, what? That has nothing to do with my sexuality. There's nothing wrong with doing that." But because they're together from an outsider's point of view, optically, I think if our goal is to educate the populace on who we are, then we need to make a more clear distinction between LGB and TQ.
He's pretty right. He's pretty correct. Yeah, I agree with that.
I think it would be an incredible disservice to the transgender community who gave us a lot of the beginning for us to fight for our rights, a separation from them, now that we have our rights. That's just so privileged of us. Like Marsha P. Johnson threw that first brick at Stonewall, and because of her...
She didn't throw the first brick.
Or the second or the
She got
third.
there at 2 a.m., first of all. And second of all, Marsha P. Johnson was also a gay man. So when she was fighting for those rights, she was fighting for gay rights because she was gay.
Was she
I
gay
totally
because of
agree.
the time that it was?
She didn't transition until long after Stonewall actually happened. But that's neither here nor there. We're here to defend.
There's a lot of things that happened here, but I do understand and see where I forget his name, the jean jacket guy is saying that it feels very rude to have trans people separated from the LGBTQ plus label after, fighting for our rights as well. I mean, we've been together for so long, but I think he's taking it a bit to the extreme here. I think he's getting a little bit defensive because what other people were saying was that we don't necessarily separate them and stop supporting them. It's just that there needs to be a clearer distinction between the two groups because the lived experience is so different. You know what I mean? So we support each other. So it's not a separation, more so like a distinction, like a line needs to be made, and then we grow together. Not like, oh, okay, we're done with you. We're cutting you off. That kind of thing. I feel like there's a bit of a misunderstanding here.
I also don't think that they should be divorced because I'm a huge disability advocate. I have a mental health condition. It's very different from someone who uses a wheelchair. We still have a disability.
He makes a good point. People who have disabilities, whether physical or mental, it's still a disability. That's a pretty cool way of framing it. Mental and physical disabilities are both disabilities, but they're distinct enough, but they're still seen as being together, and their lived experience is totally different. That's a pretty good point. Yeah, very thought-provoking.
We're a minority. They're a minority. And the more that you take apart those minorities, the harder it is for us to fight for our rights.
That's an interesting thought as well. The more you pick apart the communities, the harder it is for us to fight for our rights, because I guess what he's trying to say is when we're apart, we have to fight individually, as opposed to when we're a group where we stand united and we're together. There is power in unity and standing united for a cause and like helping each other push for things. And the thing is though, I don't think providing more clear distinction would erase that power per se. I feel like you could still support each other while still making it two separate groups and being uplifting towards each other.
Since the group is already divided, I think separating the two is going to make them even more divided and a lot more animosity between queer and T with LGBT.
That is true. I feel like even amongst gays, we're very self-centered and we don't really look towards the other groups. We don't really support the other groups quite as much. And if you do make a formal distinction between the other groups, maybe it's very possible that, we kind of just forget about them.
I passed one of those laws in Nebraska that protects children under the age of 18 from receiving gender-affirming care and hormones. Because I've seen...
And you're proud of that.
Yes, I am very proud of that.
I'm so ashamed of you.
Because I have friends who had their first experience with affirming care. Can I finish?
We're sitting here with because of the stuff you felt.
Okay, so basically he made it so that children under the age of 18 can't transition. And this is a very heated discussion and people are like going off right now. But yeah, I'm interested in hearing what he has to say, because so far, I hope this discussion continues, because so far it's getting kind of messy.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of us
so
disagree,
sad.
but let him finish, because we both have things
We can
to say.
all talk, but let's let...
Because when I passed this legislation that you say targets LGBT people, I sat next to a young girl who her first experience with this type of care was a double mastectomy at 15. She's now 19, doesn't know if she'll be able to. It's actually very common. Because
how common? I want a number. How common?
Wait.
How common?
Can I finish?
You passed
You're
the law.
asking me a question in the middle of my statement.
You passed a law that affects so many kids from feeling like themselves.
Yes,
Transgender.
I understand this is a very passionate topic, but yeah, I want to hear the whole story.
That's unfortunate, and I'm ashamed
If that's what it's going to take to get you to stop so I can finish my thought, I appreciate that.
All right, you know what? I'm going to shut up until you finish, but I would really like to say something when you're done.
Sure. The person that I testified with, who their experience was a double mastectomy.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
People talk.
Okay, that one person was one person in Nebraska. But I know a plethora of other people.
Hold on, let him finish.
I know a plethora of other people in other states all over this country.
So easy. I know a plethora of people all over the country.
Can we not do this? Like, can we let him talk? You're gonna get time to talk.
I don't appreciate it.
I'm curious too, but let him finish.
He's pissed off more than you, and he's quiet. Just let him. You're gonna get your point out. Just let him.
I'm good. Thank you.
Just let him talk.
Okay, that's fine.
You say how many people? You say it's a small subset. But for the people...
Thank you, Amir, because this is the only way we can have discussions happen, is if you let the other person talk and you understand what their points are. I feel like the jean jacket guy is really... I'm happy that he's very passionate for the trans community. At the same time, I do think it's a little strange because he's not a part of that community and he's speaking on their behalf, but I know that's a whole other discussion. But anyways, I want to hear the whole explanation, and I'm glad that Amir is stepping up to let the person talk about his controversial opinion.
Who it affects them for the rest of their lives. A decision they made as a child will affect them for the rest of their lives. This person will never feel their sensation on their chest. They don't know if they're going to ever be able to have a child, and they know they will never be able to breastfeed. They will never be a woman in the regular senses. And this is happening more and more because we are conditioning our young people to say, hey, this is okay, you can make these decisions. As a senior in this community, I have to say, wait a second, you guys are kids. Wait till you have your whole lives. Let's talk about this.
Honestly,
it sounds kind of fair. I think it sounds fair. to have children wait a little bit before they can make these decisions that will impact them for the rest of their lives. At the same time, I'm not a trans person, and I don't know what it's like to be trans and to feel out of place and have body dysmorphia. The most body dysmorphia I've had is just feeling like I'm too skinny and I need to be bigger. You know, it's not the same thing at all. To have the same level of body dysmorphia and to have the same kind of, depression and sadness and anxiety that comes from feeling so out of place with your own body, that's something I would never experience. So I can't testify as to whether or not what he's saying will help or hurt the trans community. I'm not a part of it, but I think it's a disservice to say he's in the wrong. I think he has a point, especially if what he's saying is true, that he's met people who have transitioned as a child and now regret it and now they can't go back. I think those people do need a voice as well. And it's a very sticky situation because you have people on one end, children who feel so out of place, and another end where they were just too rash and now they regret their decision. I think I'm more leaning towards what this guy is saying, because even if you feel so out of place right now, time will pass. And if you make it to 18 and you still feel very strongly about transitioning, then your headspace is more mature. I would even argue that 18 is still a bit too young. I feel like I've made a lot of bad decisions when I was 18. But at least there's more padding so that you have more time to know for sure if this is what you want. But I do see how this would be detrimental for young children who know right from the get-go that they know they are trans. One could argue you still don't know yet at that young age. I mean, again, I'm not a trans person, so I can't speak to this experience. So that's why I think it's more important than ever that we have pride and more knowledge with this kind of stuff, so that parents and friends, when they talk about being trans with their kids, they can still feel accepted and loved and supported, even if they're not allowed to transition yet. Because the reason why a lot of young trans youth don't make it to 18 is because they're just not supported. I see what the Mario guy is saying, and I'm sure there are people who transition and then regret it, and there's nothing we can do for them now. And of course I see the other side as well when I see that there are trans youth who just don't make it to 18 because they feel so alone and so out of place with their body that they off themselves before they make it. So it's a very complicated issue.
Shame on you for not going after the actual facts. I realize your anecdotal experiences move you, and I respect and appreciate that. But let's be perfectly clear. The most permanent thing a kid can go through is puberty, first of all. So when you deny a kid the opportunity to pause puberty, we're just talking about puberty.
Which straight kids do all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
Yes, since the 80s, kids have been prescribed puberty blockers for a variety of reasons.
I did not know this, so this is interesting. Let's see what he has to say. I'm interested in hearing what this perspective is.
And the law you passed prevents that. So you steal from kids who would like to be able to pause the ability to further. Fewer than 3% of people who do any kind of transition regret it and go back. Fewer than 3%. Finally, I want to make this very clear. I'm not done. You were so mean to everybody else who want to talk to you. My turn. There has been really robust standards of care laid out by all the leading medical associations that has been in existence for a long time, that is science-based, about guidelines for these things. But to be clear, the guidelines are very specific about this is supposed to be the parent's decision with their kid, with their medical provider. What you did was rob all those families of choices. Your opinion, because you believe you know better than science, you know better than parents, you know better than people who even do know themselves, you're going to prevent them from having options because you personally have a problem with something that a couple of people and some other people you're aware of knew. None of them are.
I definitely see where he is coming from. I didn't know puberty blockers were a thing. So it sounds like puberty blockers are things that a child can take to pause puberty so that they can have more time to figure out whether or not they want to transition, which seems a lot less catastrophic as opposed to, ripping your penis off and getting a vagina. And I do agree with this point that this is a decision that is supposed to be more so weighed towards the parents and the kids and their medical provider. If what he is saying is true, that less than 3% of people regret their decision, then yeah, I can see why this is a pretty big problem, where he's taken the agency from the majority of people who would like to have this agency. But then at the same time, 3% of people is still a lot of people. You can't just ignore the minority too. So yeah, very sticky situation here.
Are statistically significant. Maybe you've got dozens of people you know of, hundreds. That's a teeny tiny little sliver. You will never know or know of all of these people, and yet you've decided for them, and shame on you for it.
I think we all can agree, though, that even though he's passed legislation, over 18, you don't care what they do.
I don't care what they do.
You're just more so protecting the kids.
He's protecting
that
kids
are
he doesn't
going
have.
His laws more so protecting those kids that are just tomboys, tomgirls.
This is what I was trying to get at. Yeah, I agree with this.
They're being forced to this idea like, oh, I'm gay, maybe I'm a girl, and then like they just like pink. They like are more feminine and it's like, oh, actually transition. And
I don't think it's that simple.
And I just hate
I
that
feel
this is such
bad.
an absolutist discussion on both sides because it's like you guys are like, no, there's nothing. No, don't.
I'm not being absolute.
I'm not being absolute either.
Okay, but I
Please
just
put
don't
words
think.
in my mouth.
Okay,
I'm disappointed that someone
Can you let me
is
talk,
proud
please?
to sit
Can you
here
let me
and
talk?
pass a law that harms children.
I got it.
And we know that our
we
queer
know your
community
point. We got it. We know
is
your point.
so harmed already.
All I'm saying is that your guys are not making space for the people who have gone through this process and regret it. I personally know.
Yes, I agree with this person. Just because 3% is a tiny sliver, it's not. When you put 3% to like the entire population of the United States, the entire population of the world, that's still a huge portion of people, and you can't ignore them.
Someone in the same situation that you were in. And I'm not sitting here arguing for either side because I think this is a very nuanced discussion. It used to be a 2-year process. Now it's 6 months. Those things are changing because the capital and the motive behind it is now, which I'm sure that you guys on this side are against capitalistic, healthcare. That's pushing it. And those guidelines, yes. There's a lot of money to be made in gender affirming care.
A lot of money to
really?
doctors who are
1.6 million per child that gets on it. That's throughout their lifetime. That's how much that
There are so
makes.
many other things that kids get that make people more.
I understand that, but you're not leaving any room for nuance in this discussion.
Actually, I would argue that you guys aren't leaving room for nuance because you make a decision.
I never said a statement.
Well, okay, I apologize. And for those of you that I have been mean to, I'm sorry. I love and respect all of you as people.
I don't think it's mean.
Nuance
I think it's a
is
lot.
valuable, and that's why we leave it up to the parents and the medical professionals and the individuals who are making these decisions. There are people who get hair plugs and regret it. There are people who get nose jobs and regret it. There is no such
Well,
thing.
we don't
There's
give
no
hair plugs and
there is
nose
no-
jobs to kids.
there-
Kids can get
the
nose
point is-
jobs, can get breast jobs. Of course, kids are getting this all the time.
He's done. She's waiting on us.
Sorry, I think it sounds like we're not really gonna find a middle ground between some of you.
We will have to hug.
But can I actually sort of like wrap it up into a middle ground moment?
Yeah.
Go for it.
I think this is exactly going back to the point of why there is a separation, because it's a very
Yes, exactly. I like what this guy is saying.
lived different experience than just being a cisgendered gay man. That was the whole point of the prompt.
Yeah, because again, we're all gay here. We can't. It's really difficult for us to be having these discussions and talking about the rights of trans kids when we ourselves aren't trans, so we don't know what it's like to have a trans kid or to be trans. We can only just assume and guesstimate and theorize what the right thing is or whatnot. The people who should be having these discussions are trans people, trans parents, people who have lived the experience, who know what it's like. So yeah. It feels like we're a bunch of men discussing women's rights, That's what it feels like to me, which is why this whole thing has made me very uncomfortable, and I'm trying to learn more and be open-minded about both sides. But that's ultimately what I think. I think this is not really our discussion to have. We can talk about it, we can theorize it, but we certainly can't speak on behalf of the trans people.
This is everyone's opinion, and no matter like how frustrating it can be, going and attacking people, like it was just a lot. And if that was me, like I would be so mad and I would just go off. So, I commend you for really like holding your composure.
And I just want to apologize because that's absolutely right. And I broke my own rule in being fired up in the things I said to you. And I'm sorry, that's not how you deserve to be treated.
And I ultimately do side with my liberal brothers. That I don't agree with the legislation, but
It's not malicious.
I see where you're coming from, and that exists. And people that live here, they have that. But
Yeah, I like this guy, the brown guy, not the jean jacket guy. I like him. Like, even though he agrees with his liberal brothers, I mean, he can see, just like what I see, like what Mario is doing. I think that's what his name, right? The braid guy. What he's doing is not malicious. He's just trying to protect kids and making sure they understand everything before they go into transition. I think that's a very noble thing to think. But I do understand the nuances of the other side as well.
Drag shows are too sexual for minors.
I think it's important to not put a blanket statement over everything.
I was just going to say that.
Because I know already when they step forward that we're going to get the Miss Doubtfire example, and then it's going to be like, oh, well, why is that okay for kids and drag is not? I love a good drag show. I frequent them all the time. Most of them are not appropriate for children. Most of them. Not all, but most of them. There are instances that are circulating on social media that represent a small minority of drag shows where kids are present and then it's over-sexualized, people pleasuring themselves, wearing outfits that are representative of genitalia. For that reason, I would say that drag typically is not appropriate for children.
100% agree with everything he said here.
Do I think it needs to be legislated? No, because I don't trust the government to legislate it responsibly, but I do trust parents to use their better judgment and know that when something is typically sexual, it most likely will be, so just don't take your kids there.
Yeah. And I disagree with them.
I agree.
There were folks trying to ban drag. You can't do that. We have the First Amendment free expression. I think drag should be able to be celebrated and just kind of dress however you want. I think it is good. I think it's great, but then sometimes there are instances where it's not. And like, we have to talk about that rather than be ban drag or no, it's completely safe.
Yes, I agree. 100% agree here.
I think we need to have that middle ground conversation on what that means.
As a child who wore my sister's clothes, I wore my mom's makeup, I put on their heels, I did all the things, I just explored my, who I was. Feeling comfortable expressing yourself and being around drag could be, like, for a kid like me, if I saw that it was okay to dress up and nobody was, like, shaming me, maybe that could be helpful. But that doesn't change the fact that the majority of drag shows that we see today are sexualized.
We don't say the same thing about pop stars. It's literally the same thing, and I think that it's hyper myopic, zoned in because we are queer.
Okay, he does make a point here about, like, we don't say the same thing about pop stars. That is true, kind of. I mean, I still feel like you do have parents who are, like, who would be appalled at, like, seeing pop stars do very highly sexual things. But I see his point.
And I will get with you guys on that point where it is hyper-focused on the drag queens when it is a bigger conversation of what is acceptable and not acceptable for children, especially pop stars. When I've been to Beyonce's tour 4 times this year so far, you need to go. While I'm there, I love the experience, I love the show, but I'm also fighting in my head being like a super big fan, but I'm like, hey, this is really inappropriate for children. But no one's talking about that.
It's Beyonce. Because it's Beyonce.
There's so much footage out there of adult women with their minor daughters going to a Justin Bieber concert and being out of their minds about him being in any way sexual. They respond when he does a sexual thing. This is a norm. It's just that in this case, it's about queer people, and norms don't get to apply to us.
Right, and I think that
This is a very good point, something that I've never even considered about. So I'm marinating on this.
just art in general has the potential to, blur the lines of what's socially acceptable and what isn't. That's what makes it art. So it's important to remember that all forms of art, and I speak on this on my platforms too. When I have kids, they're not going to Hooters. I'm sorry. I'm not taking them there. I'm also not taking them to a drag show, and I'm not going to take them to a Sam Smith concert either. So, and that's not because that art is bad. It's because I'm not comfortable with my kids being there. But if the government is in the business of
for you.
Yes.
You said that you feel like you maybe could have experienced something that was good for you by seeing drag when you were little.
Right.
And then you just said you wouldn't take your kids to
Because the majority of drag shows that I've seen, I wouldn't find appropriate. I'm not going to run the risk. I'm not saying that there isn't a drag show that would be good for a child. I never said that.
Although I do think that there are wonderful drag shows that are amazing for adults, also may not be appropriate for children, but it's not inherently the art form that determines.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of drag...
I agree. It's not, now that he said it, I agree with that statement. It's not inherently the art form that is sexual. It's just that there are a lot of sexual things that do happen at some of these shows.
So if me wanting to date or open to dating a trans man, does that not make me gay?
I would say that you're bi with an attraction to masculinity.
Or pansexual.
These conversations are so tough for me because it's like, I truly believe that you love who you love and it doesn't matter. And we categorize things because that's natural for the brain, but there are nuances and there are exceptions.
When he says that, like, he would categorize him as being bi, I don't know if I would agree with that, because a trans man is a man, in my opinion. And when you say that if a gay person is attracted to a trans man, that they're bi because that person has a vagina, I think it's difficult to categorize people as such. Again, which is why I think it's very important to leave people alone in what they identify as. Because for me personally, if I was attracted to a man who I eventually found out was a trans man and actually had a vagina, I would still consider myself to be a gay person, because even though that person has a vagina, I don't define masculinity as having a penis. I define it as being masculine, having muscles, having a boxy frame, having short hair. So again, I would define myself as gay, and if someone called me bi, I don't know how I would feel about that, even though I can see where he's coming from. Which is why I think, just in general, that is why when someone tells you what they identify as, you just, you respect them and you just move on. But yeah, a little bit of a tangent, but that's what I think.
It just sucks though that gay men are being called transphobic for not wanting to date a trans man.
Well,
I think
I think we can all agree that's wrong.
I don't think that's transphobic at all. If that's not your preference, or if that's not who you like, then that's fine. Can't nobody get upset at you.
I agree with that.
LGBTQ topics should be taught in school.
I think age appropriate for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nuanced. It's age and grade. That depends on that, but I mean, there's definitely times growing up when I was in the closet in middle school, I'm like, okay, we're taught men and women, they get together and they have a baby or whatever, especially like 9th, 10th grade. But like for gay people, something that doesn't exist. We don't like women. So like, what is my experience? I'm not reading it in a book. I'm not seeing it anywhere. I'm having to run to the dark corners of the internet. I'm having to experience all these things that they shouldn't just be going through. We should be teaching something at least. But
I 100% agree with that because, you know, when you grow up and you don't have people tell you and teach you what it is that you're experiencing, you do go to the internet to learn for yourself. And the internet can be a very dark place. And actually, that's how I kind of found out that I was gay. I would be looking at porn videos and dirty images and thinking, oh yeah, this is nice, but I don't think it's age appropriate. Then again, kids will do what they will do, but I feel like there should be a level of protection for kids and when it comes to, you know, being online in general. I mean, you don't want them talking to like a 60-year-old homosexual predator. So if they learn these issues in school, I think they need to at least learn it from an authority figure in school. That's how I feel about it. They need a safe place to learn about who they are, about their identity, whether that's at home or whether that's at school. I think if it's taught at school, it's a lot better because some parents just don't want to have that discussion. I feel like as a discussion, I think kids need to have at an early age in school because that normalizes everything. That means there will be less bullying. It's just something that's a fact of life and it's seen as normal, and the kids don't feel like they're ostracized. They feel like, oh yeah, this is something that happens to other people as well, and it's a normal thing. So I think that's a very important thing to have. I think kids should be taught about gay rights and gay topics in school in an appropriate manner.
Because I don't think that it is the government's place to teach my future child about sexuality. Now, hear me out.
Okay, I'll hear him out first.
That's why it's a gray area. When teachers open the discussion to young children about sexuality and inherent sexual attraction, it puts them in a position where they could step on the toes of parents. And that's what I don't agree with.
I can see where he's going with this, but at the same time, some parents, they're not going to teach their kids about sexuality. My parents didn't. And I'm lucky that my parents are, in fact, they are accepting and they love me for who I am, but like they never taught me. And I think for other gay kids who don't have supportive parents, they need to learn about it from somewhere, and they need to have someone, even if that's a teacher, be accepting of them and tell them that it's okay to be gay and to learn about who they are, essentially. I understand where Clarkson is coming from, but I feel like relying solely on the parents, not every parent is going to teach their kids or be accepting of their kids, which is why we need teachers to teach them.
I think when you're talking about sexuality, that's like sex, that's in terms of like sexual education, sex ed, that's literally what they teach in school. So that
right,
those
and
types
I'm not
of
for
talks.
that either, which is what the point I was going to make.
Okay.
I don't think I'm a conservative who favors small government. I don't think it's the government's place to teach anyone's kids about sex. And I know there are kids that may need to learn about it because their parents aren't good parents, but I don't think that exception makes the rule.
I think that's good for you. Yeah. I'm sorry, that's good for you, but it's taught with the way the world is moving now and the way that the community is just so open and so expressive, and the child is going to see regardless. So like he was saying, instead of going to the dark web or just looking stuff up on your own and having no guidance, if you're going to teach somebody or if somebody's going to learn it, you rather them learn the correct way.
I can totally.
I 100% agree with what that guy is saying.
The government really shouldn't be in the business of teaching your children about your sexuality. No one taught us how to be gay. Who taught you how to be gay? Anybody? Was it the internet? Okay. It would have. Yeah.
My uncle actually. I didn't know he was gay.
So it was a family member.
Yes, I didn't know he was gay.
For me, as a gay man, who grew up with parents who were very, very prudish. They had no idea. They didn't even want to have a conversation. I am that example that should have been taught at school, but I learned. I figured it out on my own, just like many of us ultimately do.
I see what he's saying. People can't learn on their own, but I feel like now we live in an age of internet and very easy access, and also the internet is a very scary place. While I'm happy that he had the experience of like being able to figure stuff out on his own, his lived experience is not necessarily the lived experience that kids will go through now. I feel like it's very easy for a kid to go online and find that they're totally overly sexualized. Like I can't imagine like being 10 or 8 now at this age and figuring things out, like saying, oh yeah, I kind of like my best friend, who's a guy. What is that? Why do I like my best friend? Why do I have these feelings? And they go online and they see gay porn and it's popping up all over the place. I don't know if that's good. You know what I mean?
And what we're doing right now, where we're teaching the children about sexuality and completely not involving the parent, we're leading them down a road for psychological issues because they've got no support system at home. We're creating a school system that's supportive and a home system that they think is unsupportive. We live in 2020.
But the thing is, though, I understand what he's trying to say. It's ideal if we can teach the parents about sexuality and have the parents teach them to their kids, but some parents are just not going to do that. So the kids need to learn from somewhere that's safe. Because what happens when the parents are totally against it? The kids won't have support anyway. So you either got no support at home and no support at school, or you can have support at school and no support at home. You know, I would rather have the child have some semblance of support in school rather than just being totally blindsided at home.
Would it be great to live in a world where it's possible to reach all parents and educate them and change them from being bigoted? Great. Would it be great to be in a place where that is doable? Awesome. But you know, I was groomed by a teacher, and it was only possible because it was not okay for teachers to talk about being gay, except the one teacher who went out of his way to make his room a safe space. And because he was the only teacher and happened also, separately from being open, to be a pedophile, he was able to groom myself and others. And so unless and until kids feel like they can be completely safe wherever they are, and knowing that changing parents is kind of an impossible lift, to be frank, not making it mandatory to create safe spaces for LGBTQ kids in schools is begging for disappointment, begging for failure. And to your point about learning about being gay, the ways that I learned about being gay, especially from the internet, I'm almost 40, there's baggage from that I still carry with me.
100%.
And so if I had been comprehensively educated when I was a kid in school, my life would be meaningfully different today.
I think he said everything that I was thinking. I agree with that.
For me, the easiest thing to look at is like where you have sex education, teen pregnancy goes down, right? Yes. Education is power. I think it'd be something similar for queer people. Like if we had information about who we can be and how we can exist in all these different ways, it would empower kids in a way that they should be empowered.
Monogamous relationships are difficult to find in the gay community.
One of the leading drivers of divorce is cheating. And it seems to me taking that off the table is a great way to prevent that one pitfall. Some of the happiest same-sex couples I know are in open relationships, and they make all kinds of other sacrifices for each other, making space for each other in other ways. I think we might be best served by surrendering that one of these is right and one of these is wrong, because we put each other and ourselves in a position of an expectation of, I should want this, or I should want that, I should be this, I should be that. And if that's inconsistent with what best serves us, that's a recipe for a failed relationship, regardless of whether or not it's supposed to be open or closed.
100% agree with that. Honestly, when it comes to gay relationships, just whatever works for you works. You know what I mean? That goes for straight relationships as well. Whatever that works for you might not work for someone else, and vice versa. If monogamy is for you, then go ahead. If it's not, then, you know, have an open relationship. I don't think it's right to like judge someone based on how they live their life and how they pursue relationships, unless they're actively hurting other people, of course.
You know, I just want to say that I really respect and appreciate all of you, and I even those of you that I disagree with vehemently, I see a lot of humanity in. And I also want to say, if I said or did anything that was offensive to anyone, I just want you to know I really do respect the shit out of you.
Yeah, you guys are all amazing. I'm happy to see our message, you know, even if we don't always agree. The best part is that we each get to say what we want to say, and that's going to help move our community forward. That's really what this is all about.
I definitely respect all humans. I just feel like you have a lot of energy and passion that I wish would be used to help move the needle for all of our community in a better way. I just get nervous that sometimes in these red spaces, they will use people like you to push their agenda to harm one group of people, and then that will grow and grow and grow.
But I think they do that on both sides.
Yeah, everybody
But who's to say that I'm not using that, you guys? Remember.
Okay, can we have that soundbite?
Yeah, that was a good video. I learned a lot. Quite thought-provoking. I thought about things that I didn't really think about as a gay person, and I'm a very, I'm a casual gay. I don't even follow gay politics, so this was nice to listen to and to hear about the issues that are surrounding the LGBTQ+. So yeah, I definitely learned some things. I hope you guys learned some things as well, and if you agree with me or not, you can tell me if you want, and keep it respectful, and yeah, thanks for chilling with me as I learn more, and thank you for joining me on this learning journey. I'll see you later. Bye.